Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to see you. I have just thoroughly enjoyed my time at Eastern Hills. I think this is the third Sunday that I've been here. My wife and I live out on the West Coast, but I am so thankful to be here and have just thoroughly enjoyed spending time with your lead pastor, Rob, and with some on staff and with elders. It's just been a great privilege for me. Before we jump into the text we're going to look at today, I've got three questions for you. And this first question is an all play. So I'm going to ask you if you're above average in something or below average in something. You cannot be average. You have to be above or below, all right? That's the ground rules. And this is your opinion of yourself. The person next to you is not allowed to elbow you, not allowed to turn to you and say, really? Is that your answer? This is your answer. All right, you ready? Here's the question. I'll give you 5 seconds to think about it, and then you have to vote. It's an all play. Are you an above average driver or a below average driver? All right, how many would say, on your opinion, not your spouse's, not your parents, not anybody else, how many would say, I think, even if it's slightly above, I think I'm an above average driver? Okay, most of you. How many would say, I am a below average driver? Okay, some of you. How many think the person next to you got their answer wrong? No, let's not do that. Several years ago, they asked this question. 82% of Americans claim to be above average drivers. I'm not a math major. I don't think that maths. People tend to be very confident about their level of driving. Let me ask you another question. This, though, is no one's going to answer out loud. This is just going to be for you to think in your mind. Here's my second introductory question. Thinking about the money your family makes or that you make, at what point, like if your salary went up, your income went up, at what point will you draw the line and say, when I cross that line, that's when I think I would define myself fiscally as rich? I'm not talking emotionally, relationally, fiscally rich. When I cross that, what line is it for you that you'd say, yeah, I probably would define myself as rich there? Gallup did a survey many years ago, and what they discovered is this, that those who their household income was about $30,000 to $35,000, the average answer for when an income would make you rich was $75,000. Do you know those that made $75,000, how many of them said they were rich? None of them. Those who made $50,000 said it would take about $100,000. And basically what they discovered is anyone who makes less than $200,000, on average, they felt like they would need to double their income to feel rich. But we just know, when they get there, will they feel rich? No. Why? Because as our salary increases, so does our lifestyle. And all of a sudden, we feel like it's not quite enough. One of the other things that Gallup did with this survey is they asked those that made $200,000 or more how much they would need to have in liquid assets to feel rich. Liquid assets, they could get their hands on it pretty quickly. The average answer was $5 million. So if you were to ask someone that has $2 million if they're rich, they would say, not yet, not yet. It's really pretty incredible how we define what is rich. Now, let me talk about median household across the country, income. Median is different than average. Median means the very middle. So half the people are above this, half the people are below this. So why there's a difference if you ask what's the average age in America versus the median age in America. The extremes throw off the average. So median means half the people are above, half the people are below. The median household income nationally is $83,000. Household. The median income in Manlius is $113,000. So know this, most people in the rest of the country would say this is one rich town. Do you feel like this is rich? Probably you don't feel it like someone who's from another place that has a lot less of an income. And the reason we tend not to look at ourselves as rich is we tend to put our spending near our income so we don't feel rich. And secondly, it's who we compare ourselves to. We rarely compare ourselves to people in the poorest parts of the world. we compare ourselves to people nearby that maybe make more than we do. Now, before you imagine that this is a message to make you feel guilty about money, it is not. One of my favorite verses is, I love this verse because when people hear I work with a company that tries to help people think through generosity, some people get really nervous about that. I was talking to someone between services that was talking about, I think it was an adult sibling who showed up at a new church and really liked it, but the third message was about money, and so they decided not to go back. And my instant thought is, typically it's not because the church does it poorly, it's because we hold money very tightly and think it's no one else's business, maybe not even God's. But Ecclesiastes 5 tells us when God gives someone wealth and possessions and the ability to enjoy them, to accept their lot and be happy in their toil, this is a gift of God. If you have money, if you make $83,000 or more, if you make $113,000 or more, this is a gift of God. This is not something that's about guilt. It's a gift. So know that. We are going to talk about money, but not in a guilt-driven way. I want you to evaluate something, though, as we get to the end of this message. Okay, that's the second question. You above average driver, below, what would it take to get rich? Here's the third question. How many of you have a living sibling? You have a live sibling in the country or in the world somewhere. Okay, most of you. How many of you have a sibling in the room, like in the room with you? Okay, whose siblings down here? Are you three, all three of you? Just two of you? You two? Okay. Are two of you siblings? Okay, could you, and you're not a sibling. You're going to be today. So could you three and you two, could you come help me for a second? Come on up. Come on up. Just come on up the stairs. All right, what's your name? JC. JC? How old are you?
I'm 15.
15. Okay, come on over here, JC. Stand over here. Come on in. Don't be nervous. You weren't planning on this today, I get it. What's your name?
Kevin.
Kevin, come on in. How old are you?
I'm 16.
16, okay. What's your name?
Callum.
Callum, how old are you?
14.
14, okay. You get on the third side. We're going to go in order of age. Name?
Justin.
How old are you?
18.
18, okay. You're going to be on this side. And you are?
Nathan.
Nathan, how old?
19.
19, okay. So this is in the age, okay, scoot together like your siblings that like each other. Good. So we have 19, 18, 15, 16, 15, 14. Wow, these busy parents. Okay, so we're going to pretend they're all from one family, right? That's what this is all one family. I want to ask this question, have you think through this. Let's imagine we're not in 21st century America. Let's imagine all 5 of these are siblings, and let's imagine that they lived in Old Testament Israel days. And let's imagine, tragically, their parents die, and their parents leave an inheritance to their children. Let's imagine that it's worth $1 million. $1 million. Your first name again?
Nathan.
Nathan. How much do each of them get? Do they all get the same? They don't. Your name again?
JC.
How much does JC get? 0. Okay, we're going to put you here at the end now, JC. Okay. Now, you feel bad for it. I get it. JC, let me tell you why JC gets 0. Before you think the Bible is sexist or misogynistic or biased against women, here's the reason. In Old Testament days, very unlike 21st century America, every woman would get married. It would be a rare exception that a woman wouldn't get married. And when JC got married, let's imagine she married someone from Utica. She then would move with her husband to Utica. And money was not how inheritance was done in the Old Testament. It was done primarily through land, through property. So the idea was not that women aren't important. The idea was that JC was going to give herself to her husband and to their marriage, and she was going to help her husband farm that land so that she wouldn't have to come back to the Syracuse area and think about a partial piece of the property of her dad's land that is now deceased. Does that make sense? Now, if JC never married, then it's the oldest son's job to take care of his sister. Now, so there's $1 million. Parents die. JC gets 0. Apologize. How much do the rest get? Do they get the same? No. He gets a double portion. So you like this, don't you? JC's not a big fan, but you're in for the Old Testament stuff. Here's how this works. So we divide the inheritance not by 4, we divide it by 5. He gets 400,000, 200,000, 200,000, 200,000. Does that make sense? Okay, now, if your sister never marries, you're responsible, all right? So, but that's how the Old Testament law worked. Before we get into this story, you need to know that. Now, here's the deal. I really wasn't planning on 5 people coming, so I only have 4 gift cards. You get double, so the other 4 get the gift cards. I'm going to get you one later. Here you go. There's a $25 gift card to Starbucks. I get one later to you. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Mom and Dad, you'll be proud of your son. He said, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. No, I want to give him a gift card. Come see me after. We're going to take care of this. Oh, and by the way, JC, in following Old Testament law, there's $0 on that one. So, sorry about that. I'm just kidding. Okay, now that you know how that works, I want us to look at the passage that was read earlier. It begins in verse 13 where it says, someone in the crowd said to him, teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. Now, who's the teacher? The teacher was Jesus. Jesus is talking in a crowd, and all of a sudden, we don't know if someone interrupted him, if he was at the end of his teaching, but someone yells out, hey, teacher. You might see it in some translations, rabbi or teacher. Now, why is he asking Jesus this? He's asking Jesus this because Jesus was a rabbi or teacher, which means they were experts in the Old Testament. And he's saying, teacher, rabbi, you're an Old Testament expert. You're an expert on the law. Help me out. Tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. Likely, here's what's happening. Commentators believe it's probably a younger son saying the older son, who's the executor, is not dividing the inheritance fairly. And this young man has such a convincing case, he just says, Jesus, you tell my brother what the right thing is. Jesus, show him Deuteronomy 12 where it tells him how this works. Now, before I show you this next verse, this is incredible. You ever meet someone who says, I really love Jesus, but I don't like Christians or I don't like the church, but I love Jesus. Whenever anybody says that, I'm pretty convinced they haven't read much of the words of Jesus. Because sometimes Jesus says things that are just offensive. So try to imagine the scene. Huge crowd around. Someone very boldly, because he's being treated unjustly, says, teacher, tell my brother to be fair with the inheritance. He's the executor. I'm the younger son. Tell my brother to be fair. And here's one of the first, about 3 times, Jesus does something that makes us cringe a little bit. Here's what he says. Man, who appointed me as judge or arbiter between you? That feels rude. A person just in the middle of a crowd says, hey, teacher, you're an expert on the law. Help me out. And Jesus says, man, that man would be like us saying, hey, dude, or it's just dismissive. In other words, what does Jesus say? I'm not interested. Don't involve me. But you're the expert on the law. Jesus should be involved. I'm telling you, this is one of those moments that I think if we were there, we'd be like, oh, that's embarrassing. We might even say, Jesus, you should not have done that. You shouldn't have said that. It gets worse. Then he said, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions. Who's he talking about? He's talking about the younger brother who doesn't feel justice was done. This is rude. Like, not only did he say, I don't want to hear your case, but then he says, watch out for living the way that guy lives. Don't tell me you like the words of Jesus, you just don't like Christians. Jesus was saying things that were completely countercultural. I thought Jesus was all about justice. I thought Jesus was all about fairness. I thought Jesus was all about caring for the down and out. And here's someone who's struggling, just asking for his brother to be fair. And Jesus not only says, I'm not interested in hearing about it, he says, watch out, don't be like this guy, he's greedy. What? Now, a couple of things that I want to suggest. I wonder if Jesus would have responded differently if the man started by, hey, Jesus, my brother and I have a relational rift between us that we can't heal. Will you help us? I don't think Jesus would have said, Who made me judge or arbiter between you? And also notice, there's something else I noticed. This man, he's not asking for arbitration. He's not asking for relational reconciliation. He's demanding a ruling. He's saying, I'm right, he's wrong. Come on, Jesus, take my side. Come on, take my side. Tell him, Jesus, right? This is like when you're kids. Mom, you go and tell mom on your sibling and you're convinced they're going to side with you, right? That's what this brother is doing. And Jesus says, I'm not playing that game. And he almost rudely says, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Don't be like that guy. Even though, legally, he's calling for justice. But Jesus was far more interested in his heart than his finances. And I would say this story tells us for sure you can win financially and still lose spiritually. And Jesus warns him, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. And then the very next statement is this. He told them this parable. So the reason I've told you all of that precursor is this parable may be a well-known parable to you. I just wanted to make sure you knew the context. The reason Jesus tells this parable is because he has a guy who is being treated unfairly by his brother, but Jesus isn't going to take his side. Because there's something deeper. But know this, the younger brother hasn't broken the law, the older brother did. The younger brother wasn't trying to be unjust, the older brother was trying to be unjust. Keep that in mind as you listen to this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. So this is a farmer. And notice the story. The farmer didn't do this deceitfully, he didn't do it wrongly, he didn't steal from anybody. He didn't cheat anybody. He just had a good year. He yielded an abundant harvest through his hard work and God's blessing. He got these riches fairly. Next verse. He thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. He begins to have this internal discussion with himself, saying, what am I going to do with all of this? I don't know what to do with it. If I just leave it out, it could get stolen, it could spoil. What am I going to do with this? So he continues the self-talk. This is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there, I'll store up my surplus grain, right? It's working. Something I'm doing working. The fields, it's really producing. If this keeps happening, I've got to do something. Then he talks about the result. And I'll then say to myself, he talks about his future self-talk, and he says to himself, I'll then say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. So, successful farmer. He's having a successful season. So successful, he thinks, if I build bigger barns and have this kind of year after year, I'll be able to take it easy and won't have to work so hard all of my life. Now, it's hard for us to imagine first century. What was that like? Or even, first century times when Jesus told this parable. Jesus used illustrations of farming because most of them were farmers. So if Jesus was giving this parable to us, I wonder how he might tell it. I have a suggestion. Maybe Jesus would say this. Instead of saying the ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest, let's try to put it into our vernacular, our culture. Imagine this. Try to imagine a friend of yours who's gone into business for himself, and he and his wife started a coffee shop right in town. And it succeeded massively. I mean, every single morning there's a line out of the door. Every single morning he's up early. He's doing everything from getting the place clean to roasting the coffee, and it is a huge success. Everyone in town knows about it. It's so much a success that he didn't have enough room to make it grow. So he says to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. What shall I do? I can't handle any more customers. I can't make any more coffee. What am I going to do? I'm getting up at 3 a.m. to make this thing work. I am working so hard. Although it's successful, it's exhausting. And he comes up with a business plan. This is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I'll store up surplus grain. In our 21st century story, maybe he says, okay, I'm not going to shut this one down. It's working so well. But I have 4 more locations in the entire Syracuse region that wouldn't compete with each other. And if they do even half of the business, each of them, as the original one here in town, it's going to be amazing. So he sets out and he begins to do it, and he begins to dream. And he says, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. Our 21st century illustration, he might say, I have plenty of savings for retirement laid up for the rest of my life. I'm going to take life easy. I'm going to play golf, travel the world, enjoy my life. I'm going to quit having to be up at 3 o'clock in the morning every day to make more coffee. That's so relieving. That might be a reasonable 21st century illustration. Now, I was a pastor for a couple of decades. And if someone came to me, if someone from my church came to me and said, hey, David, here's my plan, coffee shop, 5 of them, retire early, play golf, travel the world, really enjoy life, not have to wake up at 3 a.m., not work so hard for the rest of my life. David, pastor, what do you think? I would say, that's amazing. Look at God's blessing. Going back to Ecclesiastes 5, when God gives you wealth and possessions and the ability to enjoy them, it's a gift of God. Good for you. If you had a friend that came to you to say that, you might say, that's amazing. You and I might say, do you need an investor? Right? This thing is working. So what does Jesus say? God said to him, great game plan. Okay, that's not what Jesus said. He didn't say great game plan. In fact, he said, enjoy your early retirement. Jesus didn't say that either. He didn't. Do you know what he said? You're a fool. What? Wait. This is the third time Jesus surprises us here. Why is he a fool? That doesn't make sense. There's no indication that he cheated anybody. There's no indication he was doing something sinful with this income he was making. Why is he a fool? We would congratulate him. This is the American dream, right? This is the American dream. To work hard, succeed, do well, but not have to work so hard until the day you die. What's the problem? The rest of the verse, let me go back. Jesus says, you fool, this night will be demanded from you. Who will get what you have set aside for yourself? So what's the problem here? Was it wrong to store things up? No. Proverbs 21 says, the wise store up choice food and olive oil, fools gulp theirs down. The problem wasn't that he was saving up. What is the problem? That he had so much he was going to leave some for his kids? No. Proverbs 13, a good person leaves an inheritance for their grandchildren. It's not a problem that he had so much money he would have died with leftovers. So what's the problem? Is the problem that he was working so hard and he should have been trusting God instead? No. Lazy hands make for poverty, diligent hands bring wealth. How are we supposed to view this? Do you know the story in Matthew 25 where 3 different servants are given bags of gold? Who were the ones that were told, well done, good and faithful servant? The ones who doubled the money. So why is Jesus calling him a fool? 1 Timothy 6 says, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Our farmer, our coffee shop owner, was thinking about, how can I enjoy this success I've been given? That's not a problem according to Paul, but why did Jesus call him a fool? A verse we talked about earlier, Ecclesiastes 5. When God gives to someone wealth and possessions, the ability to enjoy them, to accept their lot, be happy in their toil, this is a gift of God. It almost feels like Jesus is disagreeing with the rest of the Bible. Because the rest of the Bible indicates that if you have it and you've obtained it rightly, then it's a blessing. But Jesus calls the man a fool. Why? Here's the thing about parables. There are some parables in the Bible that Jesus never tells us what the point is, and you have people now that for 2,000 years argue about what the point of a parable is. It's almost frustrating that Jesus, why don't you tell us the point? Because Christian scholars have been arguing about some of Jesus' parables for thousands of years. But sometimes Jesus tells us exactly what the point of a parable is, and thankfully, this is one of them. So right now, here it is. You're going to find out what it is that causes someone, if they save, if they enjoy their life, if they have an abundance of possessions, where many times, most times, almost every time the Bible calls them blessed, but in this one case, they're called a fool. Here's the distinction. It's in verse 21. Jesus finishes the parable this way. This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. The problem is not even storing things up for themselves. Again, Proverbs says that's what a wise person does. The New Testament talks about God's blessing brings riches. The problem isn't the first part. The problem is they are not rich toward God. Now, the temptation when you hear this is to say, man, I'm glad I'm not rich. The problem is, well, wealth isn't evil, but it is spiritually dangerous. Let me start with that. Wealth is not evil, but it is spiritually dangerous. We talked about earlier, let me see if I have it here. Yeah, the median household income, nationally it's $83,000. But that's nationally. Here's what we're notorious at doing as Americans. When we talk about how little, we like to talk more about what we don't have than what we do have. And when we talk about what we don't have, we love to compare ourselves with people that are richer than us. This is nationally. Internationally, if you live at the median income nationally, you are in the top 5% wealthiest people in the world. In the United States of America, we are the richest country in the history of the world at the richest point in our country's history. But we tend to think we're not wealthy, we're not rich. And if you compare yourselves, forget right now, do you know that I bet every person in this room lives a better, nicer lifestyle than any king did 100 years ago? We're rich. And if you, by the way, if you have reliable transportation, whether it's you own a car or you use public transportation, if you have a roof over your head tonight, whether it's a rental or something you own, if you own more than 2 pairs of shoes, does anyone happen to own more than 2 pairs of shoes? Yeah, probably. I think so. Some of you want to say, oh, you have no idea how many shoes my wife or husband have. If you have more than 4 sets of clothing to wear, 95% of the rest of the world would say you're rich. So please don't try to excuse yourself from what Jesus said, because we just want to compare ourselves to people that are wealthier than us. And wealth is not evil, but it's spiritually dangerous. It's spiritually dangerous because of this, that we tend to trust in it. It's really interesting to me, the Bible, there's a group of people, the only group of people Jesus says are in danger of missing the kingdom of heaven aren't the poor, it's not the suffering, it's the rich. Jesus says it is difficult for someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God. Again, I tell you, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than someone who is rich to enter the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven, then he says the second time. Why is that? Because the more we have, the more we trust in what we have. Here's how you know this, and this is just from my own life. My wife and I were talking about this a few months ago, just this idea that when we were younger, when we were newly married, we got married at 22, and we're nervous about can we make ends meet, you know? And if we had a car breakdown and it was going to cost $500, do you know how much stress that would cause us? A lot. Do you know what it caused us to do? Pray. God, we do not want to start this life of living in debt and we pay it and it takes us a year to pay off this $500. God, what do? Help us make a wise decision. Please provide for us. Right? All of us have lived in that state, and some of you live in that position now. But I got to tell you, now we've been married 35 years. Next weekend is our 35th anniversary. And if our car broke down and my wife called me and said it's going to cost $500, you know what? I won't get anxious. You know what I'll get? Annoyed. Because I can afford $500. I just don't feel like it's just a pain, right? In one situation, when I had very little money, it caused me to trust in God. When I have a lot of money, I'm annoyed, like this is an inconvenience for me. This is why money is not evil, but it can be very spiritually dangerous because we're to live in a constant place of trust in God. And there comes a point in our culture where you're able to plan ahead for your future that unless some, international catastrophe happens, I think I'm set until that's kind of the goal. How can I make sure I'm set until long after my expectancy? And that actually can be a blessing, but it also can be very dangerous. Which reminds me that money is a wonderful servant and it's a terrible master. So, let me just give you what I think are 4 signs of people who are rich toward God. And by the way, I want to make this clear also. Here's what people tend to do. Well, I'm not rich. I'm not rich toward God with money, but I am with my time. And we tend to want to equalize our money and our time. But whenever God talks about our money way more than he ever talks about our time. He says that where our treasure is, that's where our heart is, not where our time is. And by the way, let me tell you something else about Americans. Americans tend to think, Christian Americans think, well, I'll be generous once I make enough money, get my kids through college, get out of debt. Statistically, though, those who aren't generous when they have little are rarely generous when they have much. In fact, statistically, the more you make in income, the less of your percentage you give as Christian Americans. Do you know Americans give less of a percentage of their income today than Americans did during the Great Depression? During the Great Depression, the average American gave 3.3% of their income away. Today, it hovers around 2% and has since World War II. 4 signs, no matter how wealthy you think you are, 4 signs of those who are rich toward God. Number 1, they tend to be planned givers. In other words, spontaneous giving is great, but it's not mature giving. Mature giving, rich toward God giving, is you plan your giving. Choose how much am I going to give away this year. Number 2, it's priority giving. Don't give the leftovers. If you give the leftover, there's very little left over because we spend it. Someone who's rich toward God, they don't just plan their giving, they give to God first. That's what we're commanded to do, give the first fruits. Thirdly, those who are rich toward God are percentage givers. It's why the woman who gave away her 2 mites is credited by God, because she gave a larger proportion. Jesus said she gave more than all the others, not in total money, but in total proportion. So I just encourage, if you want to be rich toward God, and the reason I want you to be rich toward God is I firmly believe any Christian who is not rich toward God will be judged. How do you avoid that? Be a planned giver, be a priority giver, a percentage. And you say, what percentage? I would say start with finding out what percentage you give away. Find it out. Any non-profit organization will send you a statement of what you gave. How much did you make last year? How much did you give away? And you might say, is that pre-tax or post-tax? I don't care. Just get in the conversation. And then choose a percentage, and don't just choose the percentage, grow in the percentage. Progressive giving. My wife and I, since we were first married, decided the first 10% of our income was going to go to our local church. Our goal was a 10-10-80 rule. Give 10%, save 10%, live on 80%. Since we first made that commitment, we decided 10% was a good starting place, not a finish line for us. I have a friend who every year they want to progress in their giving till the day they die. And right now he's at 14.75%. I was listening to a podcast this last week where a couple decided their goal was for as long as God would let them, they would give away the percentage of the income that matched their age. That sounds great if you're 10 years old. And so far, they're doing it. Do I think you need to get to 30, 40, 50? I don't think you need to. The question is, what is rich toward God? And if you do these 4 things, you likely will be on a path of being rich toward God. And I'm saying this to you because I want what's best for you. And I believe this with all my heart. We are in the richest country in the history of the world, at the richest point in our country's history, and very few people in our country think they're rich. But God does. But you can't find a line that says, okay, if I give this much, then God will be happy with me. I'm just asking you to have 3 conversations. Conversation 1, have a conversation with yourself like our farmer did. And just ask, if someone saw everything about my finances, would they say I'm being rich toward God? Secondly, have a conversation with God. God, here's what I give. Here's my plan. Is this being rich toward you? And ask the Holy Spirit to speak to you. And thirdly, if you're married, have a conversation with your spouse. Because likely one of you knows a whole lot more about your finances than the other. And the other one probably has no idea what percentage you give. If I could force, if I could beg, if I could plead with you, have those 3 conversations this week. Have a conversation with yourself where you're honestly evaluating. Find out what is it that you make, how much do you give. Secondly, ask God, is this being rich toward you? Thirdly, have that conversation with your spouse. Here's a couple things I know. I've never met a regretfully generous person, ever. I've never met someone who regrets being generous. I've never met a formerly generous person, because once you become generous and see what God does for you, you don't want to stop. I've also never met an accidentally generous person. It's a choice you make. And because it competes for the throne of our heart, it rarely is an easy choice. But here's what I believe and know with all my heart. And I believe this so much. Proverbs 3, 9, and 10. This is the way God typically works. That when you honor the Lord with your wealth, whatever that wealth is, whether you make $20,000 or $200,000, when you honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops, then this is the way God tends to work. Your barns will be filled to overflowing, your vats brim over with new wine. I firmly believe with all my heart that one person gives freely and gains even more, another withholds and comes to poverty. A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. The Bible's really clear. When God gives us riches, it's a blessing. But he's also clear that if we're not rich toward him with what he gives us, judgment's coming. And because we live in such a rich culture, we can convince ourselves that we're not rich. So, what does that mean for you? I don't know. Might you have to make some intentional choices to become rich toward God? Yes. Do I think you'll make sacrifices to do it? Yes. Do I think it'll be sacrifices in the long term? I don't. It's why Jesus says, give and it will be given to you, a good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be poured into your lap. And then he says, whatever measure you use, that's the measure will be used for you. You give God with a little thimble, he'll give you a thimble back. You take a big bucket and say, all right, God, I'm trusting you. I don't know how God's economy works, but it does work. Let me pray for you. God, thank you. Thank you that you call us to live beyond ourselves. Thank you that you call us to live rich toward you. And God, I long to just be encouraging yet challenging through your word to all of us and not be guilt-driven or manipulative, but God, please allow the power of your word and your spirit to work in our hearts that we ask honest questions for the glory of your name and for our great joy. Amen.